Hello, and thank you for joining me today. My name is Andrew Stinson. I'm a senior consulting engineer with Firefly. We're continuing our software-defined access series, and today we'll be talking about virtual networks. We'll look at what virtual networks are, what they're used for within our fabric, and how we use DNA Center to create them. A virtual network is an overlay used to segment traffic within our infrastructure. It's deployed as a VRF, and it gives us the macro segmentation layer within our SDA fabric. When we create our fabric, we're going to attach multiple virtual networks to it. These virtual networks are where our endpoints are going to live. By default, endpoints within a virtual network can communicate freely. Between virtual networks, however, communication is not allowed within our fabric. Virtual networks are also a container for our scalable groups. When we create our scalable groups, we have the option of assigning them to a virtual network. This gives us the ability to create these objects that we can then attach to our fabrics. This object can be created and added to multiple fabric sites, so all of these scalable groups and the users associated with them and all the policies associated with it can be replicated through our fabrics without having to repeat that workflow. Virtual networks will also be the container for our fabric IP pools or our Anycast gateways. When we create our fabric and assign our virtual networks, we're going to go into our virtual networks and add IP pools to them. They can have one or more IP pools. We could also attach layer 2 VLANs if we wanted to. Whenever we configure external connectivity for our fabric, we are going to see a list of the virtual networks deployed and be able to choose which virtual networks we want to deploy in which border handoff. So we can have one interface configured for our corporate and IoT virtual networks, and our guest virtual network can go out a completely different interface or a completely different border. We also have the option of configuring our virtual network as an anchor virtual network. This means that the border and control plane nodes that are assigned to that virtual network becomes the central point of egress for all other fabrics where that virtual network is deployed. Default behavior for a virtual network is to use the local border. This changes that behavior for those anchored sites. We're now going to switch over to our DNA Center deployment and take a look at our demo. Here we are in DNA Center. We are at the provision and SD-Access and virtual networks section. We're going to go ahead and create a new virtual network. If we had SD-WAN integration, then we could see the list of VPNs available and we could map them through here. All right, so very simple setup for our virtual networks. I'll also say that there is a workflow that you can do as well to create your layer 3 and layer 2 virtual networks. Once we've created our virtual networks, we're then going to want to come in and apply scalable groups to them. So we're going to just take a look at one of our scalable groups, edit it, and add the virtual network we just created. This tells DNA Center and our fabric that any endpoints that belong to that scalable group within a fabric that virtual network belongs to will be allowed in. That's the virtual network they belong to, and that's the IP pools and all of that associated that they'll have access to. We're now going to come back to our provision, fabric sites. We're going to look at our branch site. head over to our host onboarding and virtual networks. We're going to see that we already have a few virtual networks deployed. This infra virtual network is one that's going to be deployed in all your Fabric sites. This is a special one that is not deployed as a VRF. It's part of the underlay. This is where our access points would be deployed, for example. I'm going to go ahead and add virtual network. We see our demo virtual network here. Once I've added it, in order for it to be provisioned to my Fabric, I need to attach a VLAN or a Anycast gateway or IP pool. We'll go ahead and attach that. We'll attach our data. And we'll go ahead and add another. Now I didn't have to add and go back. You have this plus button over here that you could do to add multiple at once. Okay. I have deployed my IP pools and my virtual network. Once we get a confirmation, we will hop in and take a look. Okay, we're going to connect to our switch at our site. Do a show VRF, and that's where we're going to see the virtual network that we created. We see the interfaces that were created here. We see the SVI 172.31.01 for our data. And we see the gateway created for our voice VLAN as well. With that created, we're going to then come over to our border node, and we're going to attach it to our handoff. We'll talk about handoffs in more detail when we look at our border nodes. For right now, we're going to head over to our external interface for our main Layer 3 handoff. We're going to see the deployed virtual networks. I can go ahead and turn that on, let DNA Center know that I want to deploy it. And then I'm going to assign it a VLAN for the handoff, and then add, and deploy. And I'll deploy it now. We're going to see the icon next to the devices, letting us know that we're doing a deployment. And while that goes, we'll go ahead and reconnect to our device. And if we look at our details, we see that our interface is been assigned this 172.16.109.13 address. We'll do a show VRF again. And here we see that interface created. And here we go, 109.13. We would then continue the setup in our Fusion router, configuring that interface, that VLAN, and that IP address. And if we take a look here, we can see our VRF configuration, and we can see our BGP configuration here with the neighbor all configured and ready to go. Okay. That ends the demo for virtual networks. Thank you very much for attending. Have a great day.